Okay, we're going to get started. Senator Carrozza is testifying over in the Finance Committee, so we can't really control that, but we need to kind of get moving here. Okay, we're going to start where we left off with a couple of education bills. We're going to start at the back, bottom, with Senate Bill 1102, Blueprint for Maryland's Future. We're going to start again. We started the conversation yesterday. Stacy, why don't you maybe rehash?
Sure.
Yeah. Okay, fair enough. Let's then go to 1026. Senate Bill 1026, the Transparency in Education Spending Act. We're going to go there next.
Senate Bill 1026, County Boards of Education Budgets Notice, Transparency in Education Spending Act. This bill requires the State Board of Education to adopt a process for the uniform reporting of information in a County Board of Education budget to timely share the information provided by a county board in that budget to a county governing body. The county boards must prepare their annual budget to include as major categories: 1, specified current funds held in reserve; 2, the amount of any federal funds received in the last fiscal year; and 3, the amount of funds held in trust or otherwise dedicated toward long-term obligations for retiree healthcare costs or other post-employment benefits, and information used to calculate the county board's obligations for those costs. The bill also alters certain notification requirements regarding the transfer of funds within and between major county board budget categories. There is one amendment offered by Senator Brooks, the sponsor, that's on page 93 of your packet. This amendment alters the threshold for transfers between the major categories to 10% from 1% and strikes the requirement that transfers may only occur following versus just after approval of the county commissioners or county council.
Okay, again, we're on Senate Bill 1026. Questions for Stacy on the amendment she just described? Yes, Senator Watson.
Stacy, can you just reiterate what you just said, the 10% versus 1% again?
All right, let me get the bill out here. 93. Oh, it doesn't have the bill there. So in the bill, there's a threshold that says before they can make a transfer within or between major county board budget categories, the bill limits that. It requires that 1% they have to do this notification or get approval, whereas the amendment changes that to 10%.
I see. Okay, thank you.
Okay, additional questions for Stacy on the amendment on 1026? Okay, anybody want to move that one amendment? Is there a motion? Okay, Senator Brooks, you're the sponsor. Moves favorable, second from Senator Augustine. Any further discussion on the amendment? All in favor of that one amendment, raise your hand. All opposed, so that amendment carries. We now have Senate Bill 1026 in front of us with that amendment. Senator Brooks. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Discussion again on Senate Bill 1026 as amended. Okay. All in favor, raise your hand. All opposed, that bill carries unanimously. Okay, now Senator Carrozza, you're back here. We're going to go to Senate Bill 1102. We didn't want to take that up without you being here. So Stacy, rehash Senate Bill 1102 for the benefit of the committee.
Certainly. So instead of the generalized description, I thought I'd take a quick tour through it to give everyone a better understanding of what's in here. So Senate Bill 1102, this is Education Blueprint for Maryland's Future Alterations. What this bill does is that for Judy centers and for Patty centers, that if the department awards multi-year funding for they can use the first year of that funding for planning and development of those centers. On page 5 of the bill, there's a requirement that the AIB contract for an independent evaluation by October 1, 2024. The bill pushes that date to December 1, 2026 in recognition of the original veto of the legislation and the late startup of the AIB. Similarly, on that same page, the date is for the date that the AIB must submit a report to the Maryland General Assembly and to the governor about whether the blueprint is being implemented. That is also pushed out 2 years to January 15, 2027. The bill also modifies the national board certification requirements under the career ladder to include non-classroom teachers. And what this was, the purpose of this is to build up non-classroom teachers for the purpose of the career ladder. The AIB said in its testimony that this was a mistake in the original legislation, and this was to put it right. On page 7, it talks about a change to the pre-kindergarten expansion grant program. And essentially it adds, this requirement here would require each classroom that to qualify for the pre-expansion grant to include one teacher with a bachelor's degree who plans to pursue a state certification for teaching and early childhood education to align with the pre-K qualifications made in 2023. On page 9 of the bill, this is where I think this is the Patty Center provisions regarding the multi-year funding. Beginning on page 9 also, there's a change to the Janet L. Hoffman LARP program, or the GRASMIC part of the Hoffman LARP program, to make modifications for an allowance to include early childhood education educators in the loan assistance repayment program. Let's see, and then on page 13 of the bill, the CTE committee is charged with establishing the standards to align with the statewide goal of students, that 45% of students prior to graduation complete a high school level of registered apprenticeship or industry recognized occupational credential. That original date by which they had to come up with these standards was December 1, 2022, and this pushes it out to June 1st, 2024. Accordingly, on page 14 of the bill, the report that's consistent with the adoption of those standards is pushed to 2024 from 2022. Also on page 14 of the bill, consistent with the pushing out of the independent evaluation of the AIB and the blueprint, the provisions in the uncodified section of the law that said that if the AIB did not submit the report as required, then certain consequences would occur in terms of funding and whatnot. It pushes all of those dates out to align with those new dates offered by the AIB. If you recall, yesterday there was one amendment offered by Senator Lewis Young in your packet, and you can find that on page 100. And what these amendments do is authorize the state board and the Accountability and Implementation Board to limit the number and types of courses taken by a student duly enrolled in a public high school and an institution of higher education during the school year. It limits the courses that the student can take at the institution of higher education as part of a post-CCR pathway. And it authorizes the administration of the kindergarten readiness assessment to be completed after the statutory October 10th date, and the results to be made available more than 45 days after administration has been completed, only for the 2024-2025 school year, in recognition that the department did an analysis of the kindergarten readiness assessment and found bias, which the law had prohibited, and so they have to run some different assessments to see what works. And that's all I have.
Okay, there's a fair amount there. So questions for Stacy. We'll start with Senator Watson.
Hey, Stacy, can you just tell me why, or maybe the amendment sponsor, why they want to put a limitation on the number of classes?
Please, Senator, if you'd like to.
Yeah.
Yes, they want to put some kind guardrails around it because right now, well, first of all, it costs the local public school system a lot of money with budgets being pressed already. This is a major source of expense. And there's observation that a lot of students are using this flexibility for purposes other than what was originally intended, like not necessarily courses in their area of interest or potential major or career opportunity, but maybe more people looking to just get credits for anything, or get college paid for while they're still in high school, and maybe not the individuals we had originally intended it for. So what they're really looking for is just some guardrails to put a cap on expenses and use the program in the most constructive and targeted way possible
Thank you.
to benefit the student.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, additional questions for Stacy on the package of amendments. Senator Hester.
I had a very similar question to Senator Watson's question. I mean, I mean, it may just, I mean, and maybe we could take the amendment in two pieces. I just am struggling with why the locals wouldn't do this themselves.
So the provision in the law is that they have to offer these to any student who asks. The other provision in the law says that they can start to limit the post-CCR pathway requirements after the AIB has declared that the blueprint is fully implemented. However, the funding mechanisms for post-CCR pathways started already, which only gives them funding per student who qualifies under the CCR standard. So there's a mismatch into how much funding is provided and to what services that they are allowed to offer. So this will allow them to set a little bit of a cap on this so that they can afford to do that with the money that they have. Otherwise, they're in a position where some counties who have extra funding have no problem offering these, and other counties that don't have it, such as Howard County, are in the position where they have to limit it just because of resources. So this will put a little parity between the counties and set some standards.
Okay, any additional questions for Stacy? Is it one packet? One packet? Yes, Senator Carozza.
So the reason I missed the background on the last bill is I just had some amendments that came in for SB 1102 that were coming directly from the local school superintendents that I plan to offer. But in question to what's before us right now, the amendments that are being offered by Senator Young, have these been worked through? Senator Lewis Young, have these been worked through with the superintendents, boards of education? I'm just trying to make sure we're all staying coordinated, because this is the vehicle where we can address some of these concerns that we've been hearing about for 2 years from at the local level.
These amendments came to me through my local public school system, because Frederick is in the situation whereby we're growing very quickly, and the budget we received is based on enrollment the prior year. 1,100 school students are unfunded, and so they're looking to areas where they could achieve some savings. So I brought this forward and I vetted it with AIB. And I had a separate bill. And at one point we had some conversations about, instead of having 2 or 3 separate bills, trying to roll them into one. So these amendments, or at least 1.5 of them, were in my bill that got rolled into this bill. But that was the process: local, then AIB.
So now I better understand. You had your bill, you pulled out pieces of it. This is the vehicle that we're using for the blueprint alterations. So this is our vehicle. So these amendments that have, or the pieces of your bill that have been pulled out for these amendments, have they been, I know you said they came from your local level. Do we know if the Superintendent's Association, the Maryland Association of Boards of Education, do we know if they've actually seen this language?
What I was told by, well, I know my local school board has, as well as obviously the superintendent's office, and they said they have been in ongoing discussions with their colleagues throughout other counties as to these issues as well as others.
Do we ever, I guess I just would, I've been working on mine, and I know they're coming like from the, kind of locally from the superintendents, kind of the same way that this is what you've been hearing over probably 2 years or so. And that's when I'm just trying to get a sense of trying to make sure they're all on the same page. So whatever amendments we accept are consistent with what we're hearing from both locally and from these associations.
I've been vetting it since September.
Okay, just to be clear, so these amendments have been vetted by our state board and by the state, and I just have to put that out there. This isn't just Senator Lewis Young winging it here on this set of amendments. So any further discussion on these amendments before we take a vote? We take up other amendments, but right now we need to move. So, okay, well, could we take a roll call on this one? Is somebody going to move these amendments? Senator Washington, a second from Senator Lewis Young. Let's take a roll call on this. This is an important piece of legislation.
All right, Senator Kagan.
Aye.
Senator Kagan, yes. Senator Augustine. Senator Augustine, yes. Senator Gallion.
Yeah.
Senator Gallion, yes. Senator Watson. Senator Watson, no. Senator Lewis Young. Senator Lewis Young, yes. Senator Brooks.
Yeah.
Senator Brooks, yes. Senator Carozza.
Yes.
Senator Carozza, yes. Senator Hester. Senator Hester, yes. Senator Washington.
Yes.
Senator Washington, yes. Senator Simoneau.
Yeah.
Senator Simoneau, no. Senator Feldman.
Yes, the amendment carries 9-2. Okay, are there other amendments? Yes, Senator Carozza.
Literally got my amendments while we were on the break at 1 o'clock. I can go through them because I think they are amendments that we are hearing from directly from all of our local school superintendents, but I don't have them in the amendment format that we normally have. I just literally sent them to Stacy and Lemoria on the, they're not in pretty format, but I can walk through them and so that's what I'm bringing. I mean, I literally just got them, but I wanted to make sure what I had was coming from the locals, which it is.
Okay, well, we're gonna have to make a judgment call about whether, if they're not, in proper format, whether they need to be potentially presented on the floor as a floor amendment. I know that's not preferable, but I mean, we're under a little bit of a tight timeline given
Yeah,
crossover and the
the
like.
mistake I made is I should have asked to hold this till the end, because I thought we were doing the easy sunset ones first and not realizing that we were going right into this. So I literally got them trying to get the feedback directly. They have to do with timelines that we have consistently heard from our.
Okay, who have these been who is actually, just so we're clear, who has vetted these amendments that you are just discussing?
So the head of the school superintendents, Dr. Lawson, and several of the school superintendents.
Yeah,
So early on in session, when we had different superintendents and all gave a briefing, some of these issues, I think, like with Dr. Lawson, were brought up at that briefing. So actually, I was also looking at these and I heard that Senator Carrozza was working on these. So that's why I didn't. But, you know, if we wait and do this on the floor, what I'm afraid will happen is they'll just get kind of discounted out of right away where, you know, this is, of
Okay.
course, piece of
Okay,
piece
why
of
don't
legislation.
we,
If this is the only vehicle we
okay,
have.
but just, really, it's important that we resolve this at some point during this voting session. So, I'm still a little unclear as to, you're waiting for the actual
So I
amendment, the actual documents that would reflect, the actual amendment.
have not ordered them. I literally got the language and I sent it to Stacy and to Lamoria. I have not made an official request through DLS. I was looking for some assistance. I was sharing with the committee as soon as I received them. So, looking at it, it has to do with, timelines.
Okay,
in
why
the
don't we do
bill.
this? Because this, to kind of move the process forward, why don't you go ahead and describe the amendments?
Okay.
And then, there'll be some feedback and then we'll make some kind of a judgment on how to proceed forward. So go on. Why
So
don't you describe them?
So the first, I'm not sure where it is in the bill, but it's the 60% teaching time provisions. Is there something that I've done?
I was just getting a little feedback. Go on,
So
keep going.
the 60% teaching time provisions, the bill establishes an average teaching time of 60% as a percentage of total working time for all teachers to be phased in over 8 years. And the bill now says beginning in fiscal 2026, and the recommendation is to change that to beginning in fiscal 2027. So it's a 1-year difference on the 60% teaching time when it would go into effect.
Okay. Can you just let's get a conversation going on at least the conceptual amendments that Senator Carrozza just.
That's the first one.
First one. Why don't you go, how many are there?
3.
Okay, so let's go through all 3 and then we'll come back. Okay, let's do it one at a time. Questions on the conceptual amendment that Senator Carrozza just described, we'll call Carrozza Amendment number 1. Any discussion or conversation, questions?
I just might point out that it is consistent when the superintendents all came to us at the beginning of session. They were very consistent in trying to be in, the agreement of being in compliance, but having the flexibility that they need at the local level to stretch out the timeline. So this one would be consistent of going from fiscal 2026 to fiscal 2027.
Okay, why don't you go to the second, go through all 3 so we'll get the context of the entirety of.
Okay, the next one is the 75-25 reporting requirements. Each county board shall report on the county board's compliance with this section. 75% minimum school funding to the following programs: foundation, compensatory education, English learner, special ed, public pre-K providers, transitional supplemental instruction, comparable wage index, college and career readiness. It's to the department and to the AIB in the fiscal year following the full implementation of new financial management system and the revised financial reporting manual, pointing out that the system's not up and running. So they're looking for the flexibility that this doesn't go into effect in the fiscal year following the full implementation of the new financial management system.
Why don't you
Can I
go?
ask a question?
Sure.
Oh, I'm sorry,
No,
the third one.
No,
Go
that's
ahead. No,
okay.
let's take
Okay,
the
let's hear the third and then we'll just take questions on any
This
of the
one
3.
is based on the fact that the financial management and student data system is not operational. And what this would do is looking at providing funding, putting some type of mandated funding, the $2.5 million. And I don't know if that needs to be increased to see where we are in the development and financial management and student data system, because it's still not operational. So it's also its justification for why the second amendment why the second amendment, why they're asking for in the fiscal year following the full implementation of a new financial management system to have those 75-25 reporting requirements go into effect. So it's, so in the mandated funding is to show that at this point, it's not operational, which is justification for the second amendment. So it's really two amendments, timelines on the 60% teaching time provisions, just going from fiscal year 26 to 27, and then on the 75-25 reporting requirements, waiting until full implementation of this new system, which is not up and running at this point.
Okay, questions? Senator Kagan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question for legal counsel. What I heard from Senator Carozza was after this happens and after full implementation, and I think I heard you say FY26 or FY27 or something like that. We're doing the budget now for FY25, and I wonder whether it would make sense to focus on it next year as its own bill with all the data, one more year of data, one more year of evidence, and one more year further down the road in the plan, in the rollout of the blueprint. Stacy, would that make sense as a timetable, hypothetically?
This is a real issue. It's not that this is not a problem. There was a requirement that MSDE establishes financial management system, and it's supposed to provide school level data and other level data about funding, because the money is supposed to follow the kid in the blueprint. And this was supposed to aid that. It hasn't been established, especially in the time frame they need it, and it's not doing what they want. I don't know if this will solve that problem or it won't.
This bill or this amendment, just to be clear?
Your question,
Yeah,
Madam?
can I just want to get a clarification. Stacy, would it be this bill or this amendment that is?
I mean, this is a departmental bill,
Yes.
and they have not said that this is an issue that they wanted to take up, even though the AIB is well aware of this issue. Honestly, I just don't know, because I haven't had time to really look at it and read through it to understand whether this would solve that problem. Honestly, I just don't know.
So my response to bumping it to another year would be, we have heard for 2 years saying we're not going to do anything to the blueprint. We need to see it work out. We're into implementation now. We had all these school superintendents in front of us. Anybody who's traveling around and meeting with their districts is hearing this. Why would we want to wait another year? Why not give them some peace of mind that you give them a little bit more flexibility on these timelines? I mean, these are reasonable. It only goes from 26 to 27. That's very reasonable. And the other one is realistic, that with this, that you wouldn't put these 75-25 reporting requirements in place until you have this system up and running, which everybody's being very candid. It is not operational now. So my point would be, we have school superintendents that have been pleading with us. They're doing everything they can on the implementation of this, and they're asking for very reasonable their adjustments in timelines.
Senator Carozza, just a quick question. You talked about Dr. Lawson or Dr. Lawton or something. Can you remind the committee and anyone watching at home, who is that, please?
He is the head of the School Superintendents Association for the state of Maryland.
Kazam.
Yes.
And he's the chair.
Dr. Lawson.
And he's from which county?
Cecil?
Okay, that's helpful. I forgot. Thank you.
I did too.
Senator Hester, then Senator Gallion.
Well, as you can tell from this morning's floor report, I care a lot about information technology in the state, and we can't let the lack of good IT slow us down in our goals towards giving kids world-class education. And so I don't know, I would just offer to work with Senator Carozza maybe on some budget language to make sure that by the time we get to next year, we at least have a plan and there's money in the budget to get this done, because it's ridiculous if it's not being done. I mean, there was very little in the MITDP, this year. And so, I mean, this is a priority. So I'd be happy to, if the committee agrees, I'd be happy to work with you, Senator, because then we could also get it in this year, like get it in this year's budget so that they have to put it in next year's.
My point would be, right now, we're requiring these county boards to report on this 75-25 split, and they're basically not in a position they can do that. So that to me is why this is such a reasonable request.
What do you think of Senator Hester's idea?
I'm
Seems to
not
me
sure I
like that's a
understand
win.
it for this budget. When you say this budget.
So my offer was just to put in budget language that would restrict money from the Department of Education until they have worked with the Department of IT to come up with a plan to get this system in place. And then that plan would require money to be appropriated in next year's budget so that the system actually gets built and is up and running.
Okay, well, that's percolating. Let's go to Senator Gallion, Senator Washington. And again, there does appear to be, part of this is going to require money to solve the problem. What's that?
They have been already appropriated the money. They just haven't done it yet.
Yes.
Okay, Senator Washington, and then we'll go back to Senator Carosa. Senator Washington, you want to weigh in on any of this?
I think you answered the question. Is it the AIB or is it the state board that was to create the system?
The department, yes.
The department of, okay, was supposed to create this. And so in the bill, there's a request for an extension to what date? To 26 for them? Isn't the board or?
So Senator Carosa's amendments push this out. Let's see here.
But I mean, in the bill as drafted, we're pushing out some dates, aren't we?
Right, those are reporting dates, yes.
And who's reporting dates?
In some cases, it's the AIB, it's the date they have to contract for a certain report, and the CTE committee for them to report to the MGA and the governor on the goals for to comply with the 45% for apprenticeships or licensing provision.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Okay, Senator Gallion.
Mr. Chair, if we're going down down the river and you see the iceberg out in the ocean, I think sometimes if you think that's what it is and we can move a little early, I'd rather do that than after we hit it. So a question for the sponsor of the amendments. Very early in session, this is, coming from, I deal with two superintendents. They both had issues with one word, and that's flexibility. So that to me is their biggest concern, and they're trying to implement the blueprint in good faith. They're trying to do the right thing. They're trying to get this implemented. So in your estimation, would these amendments that you've offered give them at least most of that flexibility that they've been asking us for months and months?
If you look at, we have two different amendments in front of us. So the answer would be yes. On the one, we have heard specifically about the 60% teaching time, the percentage. This is one that they have brought up locally, and this is one they brought up in front of the full committee. And all this amendment does is takes it from fiscal year 2026 and moves it to fiscal year 2027. So I believe that takes some of that pressure that they have been sharing with us in this one category on this 60% teaching time provisions. The other one, just to be clear, and I apologize if I didn't fully explain it, but this 75-25% reporting requirement is for each of our county boards to report on. So, they're basically saying right now the dates are on or before July 1, 2024 for fiscal year 2025, and each July 1 thereafter. They would strike that to say, we can't do that until this system is operational, which is why they're saying we can do this after the system is operational. And that's why they're saying in the fiscal year following the full implementation of the new financial management system. So it does go back to Senator Hester's point. Right now, it's not operational. So to expect them to report, to expect the county boards to report on this on or before July 1st, 2024 for fiscal year 2025 is a ridiculous expectation.
Can I just ask, I mean, it's pure process. So we had a hearing on this bill on the 23rd of February. I don't recall, that was several weeks ago. I mean, just in terms of trying to do policy on the fly here, I don't recall testimony on this topic or anybody showing up at the witness stand, proffering this kind of an amendment. I mean, I just have to put that out there. Yes, Senator Gallion, and maybe I'm incorrect. I'm just trying to refresh my.
So the amendment
several weeks ago.
Sure. So the amendment we just accepted not long ago from Senator Lewis Young, when we just recently had that bill hearing, and I asked them about the 75-25 issue, if that had been addressed, and because that's the biggest issue we're hearing about. They basically said no. So to me, we have brought it up when the different groups, AIB and the superintendent were here very early for their briefing. It was, they had these concerns. Well, the superintendents had those concerns. So I think it's about trying to find the right vehicle. And this is the vehicle that's moving. That's why we're trying to jump on this one, because it's the one that's moving. We see an issue, and I feel strongly that that we need to do this now instead of waiting. Because it's very important, and like I mentioned, these superintendents they're trying to do the right thing and do this implementation of this blueprint. And if this gives them help, I think it's worthwhile. My 2 cents.
Okay,
So to your question, to
Sure.
me, I saw this as when we talked, actually, when we even talked during the interim. When we talked even during the interim, Mr. Chair, I recall you saying there might be different vehicles to be able to bring these issues, even if you don't do a separate bill. So I did not do a separate bill because I was under the assumption that there would be vehicles. This is clearly the vehicle. I mean, this is the blueprint, alterations bill, and these are specific recommendations and amendments dealing with timelines in 2 specific areas. So it's the right bill, and we heard it directly from our local school superintendents.
I'll hear from Senator Hester. Okay, I'm going to come back to some basic stuff. It's a department bill, right? And so what I'm going to suggest to you is, we're going to maybe continue. If you can get go out and make a phone call to Rachel Heiss at the AIB and see if, they're somehow going to be on board. This is department bill, so I'm kind of reluctant to sort of just wing it here in the committee. They're not here, and I'm not quite sure how to kind of move forward with your conceptual amendment without the department having an opportunity to be here to respond. That's kind of one way of looking at this. I hate to put us in this box, but I'll come back to the original thing, and we can take a vote on your conceptual amendments. We could take it to the floor, and you can try to have a conversation with AIB and see if they're willing to have a conversation about what you're proffering. I mean, to me, those are the options, because I think just winging it here without the benefit of a department position on their bill seems a little irresponsible on the part of the committee, but that's just me weighing in on process wise. So Senator Hester and then Senator Washington.
I just had a question, which maybe has to go to AIB, but maybe council could answer. I mean, that is, does the AIB have the discretion? Like if they literally can't report because they don't have the right IT system in place, could the AIB just give them a little bit of discretion? Or does it require a legislative fix? Or we can ask Rachel.
I think you can ask Rachel, but I'm pretty sure it's in the law.
Right, the dates are.
Yeah.
So there's no ability for the AIB to okay.
Okay, Senator Washington.
So just a couple, mostly one thing. So the AIB is an independent unit of government, and the department is the State Department of Education. So AIB is a board. So I agree with the chair that we should have a conversation, with all the stakeholders that, for example, were a part of the 771. And however, So having said that, however, if there are additional things and if there's a willingness by our state board of our Department of Education, the State Board of Education, and the AIB, who are all working together in this cabal, can decide, if those amendments are accepted. And then we have some direction as a.
Well, I'm
committee.
just saying, drawing by contrast to the Lewis Young amendment, which was in fact vetted by
Yes, we could
those
do that
folks.
one.
So
Right,
just to
right.
compare and
Oh.
contrast here a little bit,
Yes.
again, process wise and trying to, kind of get a sense. Okay, Sarah Carosa, look, we could take a vote on your conceptual amendments here and now. We could take a vote on the bill as amended with the Lewis Young, and then I don't think this will be reported for a day or I don't know, Oh, yes, I forgot. This bill still has to go to the Budget and Tax Committee, which is another reason I think we need to move one way or the other. And so by the time it goes to B&T and goes to the floor, Sarah Carosa, I think I would open up a line of conversation directly with the folks that Sarah Lewis Young talked to, and we get to the floor. If there's some kind of an amendment, then fine. But I again, I'm feeling super uncomfortable process wise, just winging it is where I'm coming from. But you could press the amendment, you can press the conceptual amendment, we could take a vote. But I would be inclined to resist that, but on the floor, things could change. So anyway, I'll yield back to you.
So process wise, if we don't consider the amendments here, it still goes to B&T, that it could still be
It could be
considered
put
there.
on at B&T.
But I guess they would be looking for guidance on policy. And I guess I understand the process and it's a departmental bill, but we are also the policymakers. And so I think to offer amendments that are, go right to the heart of this bill and the timeline. So I would say that we are the policymakers. But I understand your point about, working it through with them. I just think the one option that you're giving on the Senate floor makes it very difficult. We know.
I'm giving the other option here is between now and when the Budget and Tax Committee takes it up and takes a vote, that you open up some conversations, as was the case in the other amendment, and see if you can make some progress, and then we'll be, back in the game. But to hold it up here on conceptual amendments without any feedback from the department or AIB or anybody, I think is not good way of doing policy. So that's, I guess, what I'm saying.
All right, well, so then I'll accept the option of not pressing a vote here to have it work through budget B&T. And then I would think, especially the members around on this committee who are hearing directly from their superintendents on this issue would, appreciate their support and weighing in with the B&T members as well.
Okay, I think to me, that's the most, to me, that makes the most sense. That's where we are right now. It's got to go to B&T. We're facing some deadlines. Senator Washington?
Yeah, and then again, I agree and commit to that we will have those discussions with those identified entities. It won't just be ignored, and we'll have that conversation. And the bill's still alive, so we can still see if that's something they can agree to. No, and again, just recognizing there is a lot, and that we will continue this discussion over the interim. There's a lot for us to look at with the blueprint, but also we shouldn't do things quickly, but we can consider this one amendment.
Okay, so we do have a bill with an amendment that has been adopted. Is there a motion favorable on this bill, Senate Bill 1102 as amended? I've got Vice Chair Kagan favorable. Is there a second from Senator Washington? Okay, let's do a roll call on this bill as amended, understanding that the conversation will continue over to the Budget and Tax Committee before it hits the floor. So, Lamoria, take the call on Senate Bill 1102 as amended.
All right, Senator Kagan.
Aye.
Senator Kagan, yes. Senator Augustine. Yes. Senator Augustine, yes. Senator Gallion.
I'm voting yes, but I believe with the amendments we've talked about for last half hour or so could greatly improve this bill. So I'm holding out hope that either through B&T or the floor that we can do that so we can take a decent bill and make it a really, really good, successful bill. So yes.
All right, Senator Watson.
Yeah.
Senator Watson, yes. Senator Louis Young.
Yeah.
Senator Louis Young, yes. Senator Brooks.
Yeah.
Senator Brooks, yes. Senator Carosa.
Yes.
Senator Carosa, yes. Senator Hester. Senator Hester, yes. Senator Washington.
Yes.
Senator Washington, yes. Senator Simonaire. Senator Simonaire, yes. And Senator Feldman.
Okay, Feldman goes yes, that bill passes unanimously. Let's go back to the front page and stay with you, Stacy, and go through some of these bills assigned to you, starting with Senate Bill 99.
Okay. Senate Bill 99, election law, affiliating with a party and voting unaffiliated voters. This bill authorizes an unaffiliated voter to apply to change the voter's existing voter registration to affiliate with a political party during early voting before a primary election. If an election judge at an early voting center determines that the voter resides in the county, the voter may vote and have counted a provisional ballot for the political party. This bill takes effect on January 1, 2025.
Are there any amendments? I'm sorry.
No.
No amendments?
I apologize. No amendments in opposition.
Okay, Senator Kagan, you want to add anything before we take it up?
I'd like to move favorable, and this is to address the rising number of unaffiliated voters. And in our state and a lot of states, the elections are really decided in the primaries.
Okay, is there a second? Or any second? Second? Senator Brooks, okay, discussion. Okay, all in favor, no amendments yet, discussion? Discussion, no? Yes, Senator Gallion.
So just to refresh on this one.
Mhm.
So if you're unaffiliated, you go in on election day and then you can,
During early voting.
it's just early voting. It's
Mhm.
not,
Mhm.
okay.
Allows you to change your affiliation during early voting, and you remain in that party unless you affirmatively make another change.
So it's not just from unaffiliated to a,
Yes, so in
It
order
is.
to vote in the primary, you have to belong or register with one of the parties. So if you are currently unaffiliated, you walk in early voting and you say, I'd like to vote the Democratic ballot. Then you can get a provisional ballot, a provisional Democratic ballot, and they will register you as a Democrat. And then if you decide you want to become unaffiliated again, then you have to affirmatively request that you change your party affiliation.
Okay, Senator Lewis Young.
I think I may have asked this question during the hearing, but it's worth asking again. Do we have any data on other jurisdictions that have done this?
Yes.
And people come in and vote, change their affiliation, not because they want to vote in primaries, but because they want to alter the outcome of the primary for nefarious purposes.
So they could do that now if they were that strategic
true.
and that nefarious, they would just have to do it earlier.
I've seen it happen.
Okay.
Okay,
Okay, Senator Simonaire.
So just the scope of this bill. So unaffiliated can't vote in a primary.
Correct.
So they can change their,
Except for school board.
gotcha. So,
Correct.
so this bill would allow a registered voter to change their affiliation so they could vote in a party of their choice.
Correct.
Can a Democrat
No.
change to be a Republican because they can't vote in that?
No. It's a really important question. The answer is no. Maryland will still have closed primaries, which means, so no, you can't make the full leap. And no, they can't, so you can go from unaffiliated to D, unaffiliated to R. You can't go from D to R or R to D.
So let me just follow that a little. So unaffiliated could change their party earlier
Yes,
to vote in a Republican. A Democrat could earlier change their affiliation to be a Republican.
yes.
But on election day, we're only going to allow one of those groups to change on election day. I don't understand
This is
why,
allowing, right.
what the difference is.
So currently, as you know, Senator, anybody who is not registered can walk in during early voting or on election day, who has never been registered, and register, affiliate, and vote a full ballot. So this is moving towards allowing unaffiliated voters to be treated a little similarly, a little more closely to those who are registering for the first time.
I guess I don't understand the policy that there's a provision to allow all voters to change their affiliation. But we're going to make a special exception for unaffiliated that for whatever reason didn't do that. We're going to let them change, but others can't. I don't, and that's just I have a problem with that.
So when there are a lot of states that are open primaries or allow more flexibility. So when people move here from other states or other countries, they may not be familiar with their limitations until it gets closer to the election and people start focusing on it. And so, yes, anyone can change from anything to anything earlier. This lets them focus on it a little more last minute during early voting. So it's just moving forward and giving them a little bit more time to be able to affiliate and vote a party ballot.
Okay, we're gonna go to Senator Augustine and Senator Carosa.
So, when a person has registered to vote, in this instance, they've actually registered, which is different than a person who hasn't registered, which we understand. We're trying to encourage them to come, but then they're making a decision when they come to register. They make a choice. They come, they say, I want to be a Democrat. I want to be a Republican, or, these people have made an affirmative decision because they registered to be unaffiliated. Isn't that correct? Because these are people who are already registered to vote and have made an affirmative decision to say that they don't want, that this is their party affiliation.
I think you could say it that way. I'm going to disagree with your characterization. Sometimes it's a pox on both your houses. Sometimes it's I'm at the MVA and I'm grumpy because I've been waiting in line a long time, or I'm confused, or in my country, your family could get murdered if you registered with the wrong party. They don't quite understand the implications. I can just tell you that if you go back to 1990, not that long ago, 8% of our voters, you guys, 8% were unaffiliated. Now, this year, it's 21.4%. The increase is astronomical. And the question is, do we want to include these people in our democracy and offer them the opportunity? I assure you that the 900,000 Marylanders are not all going to rush in and affiliate and vote. But if they decide that they're inspired by a candidate for governor or president or state senator, I personally, as a policy issue, as well as strategic in terms of increasing democracy, I think it's a good idea, and it's working in a lot of other states.
So under current law, they could change like anybody else, couldn't they? I mean, in the same way that a Democrat who is so inspired could decide that they don't want to be that they've got some inspirational candidate that they want to get to. I mean, within the current law. So, right? I mean, the way it is right now, if they were so inspired, I mean, it's just when they do it.
When they do it, a lot of voters, as we know from our door knocking and all that, and from poll data, a lot of voters don't focus on the elections the way we do. And they focus in the final days, the final hours before they have to make a decision. So this offers people the opportunity to participate.
Can I just say finally on it, like I've talked to, because I've wondered, I said, oh, I want to see if you can get involved and stuff like that. And then I find folks, they're unaffiliated. And when I talk to them about it, they're like, no, I affirmatively want to be unaffiliated. Like, I don't want to associate with this party or that party. And they've made that choice, they made that decision. And so for me, I feel like in the same way that I've made a choice and I've made an affirmative decision to join a party, and with that, there is an activity where that party decides who the candidate they want to have for that general election is. But that it's a mechanism. I mean, the party is a choice that I've made.
Sure.
And so for me, I just feel like they could do the same thing. If they decided to change earlier, they could. I'm not sure why we would give them more flexibility than we would give to others.
So we already do give it to others. So I'm not
I
quite
said
sure.
more.
No.
The bill gives more if you're allowing them to do something that you're not going to allow for someone who is registered to be a green, to be I mean, any of these other parties that are out there, you're saying they can't do it.
So if someone is happy to be unaffiliated, they should either not vote in primaries or happily come in and vote for school board. And that's totally fine. This bill won't affect them. This is only for people who didn't know, didn't realize it, changed their mind. And the fact that our number of provisional ballots has almost doubled in recent years is largely because, and we're working on a lot of, we've seen some data, because people have insisted that they want to cast a ballot, a partisan ballot during the primary. And the judge explains to them, it's not going to count. We can't do that. You're registered unaffiliated. And so many of them do change their ballots, their party affiliation there, but it's too late. And then in November, as everyone knows, they can vote for anyone from any party, and that doesn't matter how you're affiliated. So
Okay,
this is a little more inclusive.
we're gonna go to Senator Carosa. It's a good spirited conversation. At some point, we're gonna have to just take a roll call on this up or down, and that's how it works. Okay, Senator Carosa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to go back to, I went back to the bill hearing file, and the Maryland Association of Election Officials had a letter of information, and they went through, I think, some of their concerns, increase in provisional ballots, confusion between independent and unaffiliated voters, gaming the system, impact on ballot and supply orders. You know, I know you and I work closely with the members of the Maryland Association of Election Officials at the local level. So this was concerning to see this letter.
Yes. Thank you for bringing that up. You may or may not remember that at the hearing, that I basically dismissed this letter. This was a new guy who didn't really have the facts, and there were a lot of factual inaccuracies in his letter, is the bottom line.
Is the chair of that.
Yeah, the
that-
very new chair who's not worked on these issues before.
Okay, further questions, discussion? Does anybody need more information before we take a vote?
The last thing is
Sure.
this bill would make Maryland essentially the same primary system as Illinois, Iowa, Kansas, and Rhode Island. Very similar to Arizona, Colorado, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, and North Carolina, where unaffiliated voters can vote in primaries.
Okay, it's time to exercise democracy here. Lemuria, take the call, take a vote. Okay, yes,
Sorry.
that's okay. Go on. Question.
I was just thinking about our younger voters, and my question was, when they register at the DMV, what choices are they given?
They are given the same choices as anyone who registers anywhere else at the Board of Elections or online. They are presented with all the parties. Young people are disproportionately likely to choose unaffiliated, and are part of the reason for the skyrocketing numbers from 8% to 21 point, whatever I said before, percent of
Are
our
they
electorate.
told when they register as unaffiliated, they can't vote in primaries?
So bunch of years ago, there was a Kagan-Hershey bill that was enacted into law that specifically said on the voter registration form, basically, unless you affiliate, you're not going to be able to vote in primaries. But but not everybody pays attention to that. It's unclear whether they even understand the implications until they are passionate about a candidate, about a campaign. And again, 46 of the 47 senators in this body were elected with more than 55% in the general election. That means that the decisions are made in the primaries.
Okay.
I hope that you all will support this.
Okay, further questions, discussion before we take a vote? There is a favorable motion. Memoria, go around the horn.
All right, Senator Kagan.
Aye.
Senator Kagan, yes. Senator Augustine. No. Senator Augustine, no. Senator Gallion. Senator Gallion, no. Senator Watson. Senator Watson, yes. Senator Lewis Young. Senator Lewis Young, yes. Senator Brooks. Senator Brooks, yes. Senator Carozza. Senator Carozza, no. Senator Hester. Senator Hester, yes. Senator Washington. Senator Washington, yes. Senator Simonaire. No. Senator Simonaire, no. Senator Feldman.
Okay, yes, bill carries 7-4. Next up, before we do anything else, let's go back to the back. We had one withdraw, Senate Bill 798. Senator Hester withdrew 798. Is there a motion unfavorable on the withdrawal? Can somebody make a motion on that? Okay, Senator Hester moves to unfavorable on Senate Bill 798, the withdrawal. Is there a second? Second, Senator Lewis Young. All in favor of the withdrawal on Senate Bill 798, raise your hand. All opposed, that bill is unfavorable. Next up on Senate Bill 818, I understand we're going to hold that bill. Senator Hester, is that accurate? Correct? Okay, so Senate bill for your list, put 818 as a whole. And then also Senator Hester, let's just quickly give us, I know you've done a lot of thought on the 5 sunsets we have back on page 1 over the last few days. I think you had some thoughts, recommendations on how we might approach those 5 sunsets. So we're back on the front page.
Mr. Chair, I spoke this earlier today with Vicky Gruber. And what she did is she suggested that it'd be helpful that 2 years before a sunset, the department would answer some questions for the Joint Audit Committee. And so and with that said, she also was confident that that there was no burning issues with these boards. So the amendments that I've had prepared, and I believe Alexis has, extends for 3 years, everybody except for the boilers rules board, which gets 5, and it adds a reporting requirement that 2 years before the next sunset, they actually respond to some questions from the Joint Audit Committee. And the Joint Audit Committee can do this work and give us kind of their stamp of approval. And so we then, have something on paper before we actually get to these voting sessions. And I believe Alexis has the amendments.
Okay, we're going to distribute them. We've been discussing sunset extensions for several sessions here. I think it's time to bring some closure to this topic area. Back to you, Alexis.
Sure.
So why don't we start, okay, let's just take these one at a time. Start with Senate Bill 261, and there is this amendment, and why don't you describe it, and then we'll just go through the 5 sunsets.
All right, so Senate Bill 261, State Board of Barbers Sunset Extension. The bill, as introduced, would extend the sunset termination date to 2034. State Board of Barbers expires this year, July 1 of this year. So under Senator Hester's amendments, we would extend the Board of Barbers to 2026. And as is the template for each of Senator Hester's amendments, the secondary amendment requires by July 1st, 2025, the Department of Labor to submit a report to the Joint Audit and Evaluation Committee based off of the information that they request.
Okay.
Question.
Sure, Senator Kagan.
Alexis, I have the amendment for Senate Bill 296. Is 261 and are each of these essentially the same?
The reporting requirement is the same.
Yes.
The length that we extended is going to be different. So I'm happy to walk through each one. That's going to be a little separate.
I'm good. I just wanted to
Okay.
clarify that I
Yep.
was looking at the right
The
thing.
report at the end is the same.
So Senator Hester, you want to move the amendment or I'll move the amendment?
This is 296, so we should just be
This is
clear.
261. The chair just said. That's what I just asked the clarification.
Alexis,
So
we have, it's the
I
same
got them
amendment.
right.
Okay.
I got them a little late. So I wanted to put something before us so we could see the reporting language. So the reporting language is going to apply for each one.
Yes.
Senator Hester also has an amendment for each one.
that extends the sunset termination date by a set amount of years, but not for the full length of 10.
Okay, they're all three except for the boilers is 5.
That's not entirely true.
Okay, then tell me what's true.
So for 261, we're going 2 years. Tax preparers, we don't extend them at all.
Let's go back to one
Okay.
language that's identical,
Yep.
except for the length of time. So in 261.
Can I just ask one
Yes,
question
Senator
first?
Hester, sure.
So the point of the extension to 2027 was to, because it's 3 years from to date, that gives the Joint Audit Committee a year to come up with the questions and the department 2 years to answer. So I guess technically they could all be, depending on when they were sunset, it could be different extension lengths. But they should, except for the boilers, they should all be 2027. Is that correct?
No, they have different deadlines, right? So tax preparers terminate in 2026, right? So we remove the sunset for them. Everyone else, with the exception, everyone else terminates in 2024. So we end up doing 2 years for barbers, 3 years for cosmetologists, 3 years for land surveyors, 5 years for boiler rules, and we didn't extend the tax preparers at all because they are already good until 2026.
Senator Hester, what I'm hearing between Alexis and you, if we're on 261 and we're on barbers, which expires this year in 24, you're suggesting not 2 years, but 3. So you're suggesting 2027, which would make this essentially identical to the 296 handout. So
Yeah.
I'm happy to support that. I'm move favorable on the modified amendment or the 296 amendment with just the bill number crossed off to 261.
That's
3
right.
years.
So, yep.
That's what
The
you think?
proposed amendment would be to extend the State Board of Barbers for 3 years.
3 years.
Ending in 2027 with the reporting requirement
Yes.
due by July 1st,
Okay,
2025.
so as you understand it, as the sponsor of the amendment?
Yes.
So you
Okay,
move.
okay, we have
Move the amendment.
move it.
Second.
Senator Kagan moves the amendments, Hester seconds. Any conversations, questions? Again, we're on 261. All in favor of that amendment we just heard, raise your hand. All opposed, that amendment carries. We now have 261 with that amendment in front of us. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Senator, second, motion favorable from Senator Kagan, second from Senator Augustine. All in favor of Senate Bill 261 as amended, raise your hand. All opposed, bill carries unanimously. Let's next move to Senate Bill 264.
Similar. So the proposed amendments would be to extend the State Board of Cosmetologists from 2024 to 2027 with a reporting requirement by July 1st, 2025, with information that the Joint Audit and Evaluation Committee requests.
Okay, is there a motion moving the amendment?
Second.
Senator Augustine, yes, absolutely. Discussion, Senator Augustine.
Okay, I understand what you're doing. Are they able to do it, the joint audit folks, like, since we're gonna be stacking them up with additional work with this? Am I misunderstanding, or I'm
Put
just
your mic
trying to
there,
figure
yeah.
out if that's what we're doing? Are we stacking them up with work in order to get them done prior to these dates where we're kind of putting them all at the same
So
time?
my conversation with Vicky, which I haven't had a chance to check with the joint chairs yet, was that the joint committee would send a letter to the board saying like, can you answer these 5 questions?
Okay.
The board then has to answer those 5 questions, by date certain, and then the joint audit committee will review it. But we talked about OLA, we talked the Office of Legislative Audits doing more auditing. We talked about the Performance Evaluation Group doing a report. Vicky and I felt mutually that we didn't need to be that heavy-handed, that if we had this letter back and forth,
That would suffice.
that then we could see if there was a problem. Then if there's a
Okay.
big problem, then we ask the performance evaluation audit to do a deeper dive. That was my understanding of our conversation, but I have not had a chance to talk with Chair Lamb or Chair Solomon. I'm sorry.
Years rather than 2, right?
Exactly. It's 3 years from today.
And it's a letter, not the reports.
We could, if you guys would prefer.
I'm just asking.
It
It says report.
the concept was ask some questions and they would answer the questions, whether that's a report or a letter.
And we're not defining it here, we're just calling it a report, but you're saying that you thought that that report was this
So the,
five.
so the joint committee will then, you know, the chairs of the joint committee would then decide what the questions were they wanted to answer, I believe with some help from Ms. Vicky Gruber. And then they would send those letters out.
Okay. All right.
Okay, so again, we're back on 264 at this point. And we had a motion on the favorable on the amendment. Another Hester amendment, a second
Second.
Senator Kagan. Discussion, all in favor of that amendment on 264, raise your hand. All opposed. Bill, that amendment carries unanimously. 264 as amended is in front of us. Is there a motion? Motion favorable from Sarah Augustine, second from Vice Chair Kagan. All in favor of 264 as amended, raise your hand. That bill carries unanimously. Let's go to 288.
Now, Alexis said tax preparers were different.
Yes, we're on we're on tax preparers. Alexis, why don't you
Yep.
explain that one a little bit
So
different?
tax preparers are effective until 2026. So what the amendments do is remove the sunset termination in total, right? So we're not extending them at all. They'll expire in 2026. And then by July 1st, 2025, in conformance with the other reporting requirements we just adopted, they would submit whatever information audit requires of them.
Okay, is there a motion on that amendment? Is there a motion?
Sure.
Second.
Okay, we got a favorable from Sarah Augustine, second from Senator Kagan. Yes, discussion on the
Just
amendment.
for my understanding, it would mean then though that we would come back if we wanted this to continue to live, then they'll have to come back here, even though there's not a sunset, we'll have to reconstitute or whatever, or just change the date in the statute
Right,
in
we
order
probably
for it
end
to
up
go on.
changing the date next year. Right. We would likely end up changing the date next year or the year after, frankly, because the report for this one is due July 1st, 2025.
Okay,
You know.
so with a satisfactory report on the 25 of
Mhm.
next year, there would still be time in legislative session 26
Right.
to, in essence, change the date to extend the life of
That's
this
right.
board.
Mhm.
But this is now different than a sunset, though?
So it would be, it's still a sunset, right? We would, when we return, maybe in 2025, maybe in 2026, we would extend it for the years that you all choose to. We
Okay,
still have the sunset extension process in effect, you know, in statute. So we do have to come back with reauthorizing legislation. With this one expiring in 2026, we may do that next year or cutting it a little close in 2026.
okay.
Question.
Okay, Vice Chair Kagan.
Thank you. If all these others are going till 27, does it make sense to just put the tax preparers on the same cycle and just? Okay, so what if, so may I amend the amendment then, Senator Hester, to make it 27 rather than 26? And so
That's
there's less
fine
the
with me.
hair on fire. It's more time for the investigation report letter thing. So it's only a 1-year extension from their 2 years from now expiration. Is that a
So-
friendly amendment?
Okay, does everybody?
Okay.
Okay, so the motion and the favorable on this will now apply to the amended amendment. Okay, does everybody understand that? Okay, all in favor of that amendment, amended amendment, raise your hand. All opposed, that carries. We've got Senate Bill 288 as amended for us. Favorable from Sarah Augustine, second from Vice Chair Kagan. All in favor, raise your hand on Senate Bill 288 as amended. That bill carries unanimously. Let's go to Senate Bill 296.
All right, Senate Bill 296, State Board for Professional Land Surveyor Sunset Extension. Similar to what we just did for tax preparers, the amendment is to extend it for 3 years with the report by next year.
Second.
Okay, we got an amendment favorable in a second. All in favor of the amendment, raise your hand. All opposed, amendment carries. Senate Bill 296 as amended is in front of us. Motion, Sarah Augustine, second from Vice Chair Kagan. All in favor, of Senate Bill 296 as amended, raise your hand. All opposed, that bill now carries. Let's go to that final one, Senate Bill 307, dealing with the boilers.
All right,
Alexis.
so Senate Bill 307, the bill is drafted, extended the sunset to 2034. Senator Hester's amendments extended to 5 years. The logic behind this was because they were included within a recent audit as recent as 2022. So it sounds like the senator is comfortable with the 5-year period for their extension. They would additionally submit the same report by July 1st, 2025. There's also an additional amendment sponsored by the chair for the membership of the committee when we get to that point.
Sunset would be when, please?
2029.
5 years.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we have that First Amendment in front of us. Senator Hester, favorable, second Vice Chair Kagan. All in favor of that amendment, raise your hand. All opposed, that amendment carries. Alexis, you indicated there was an additional amendment?
Yes, so this one is included in our packet, Senate, for Senate Bill 307 on page 5. And this would increase the membership of the Board of Boiler Rules from 9 members to 10, and the added member has to be a representative of maintenance and repair within the boiler rules industry.
Augustine question here.
Yeah, that's an even number. That could, is that it? Is that what you're gonna raise? Okay, well,
If people boil over.
how about for this one? Okay. Okay, any further discussion on that Second Amendment? Okay, is there a motion? Favorable, second from Senator Hester. All in favor of that Second Amendment, raise your hand. All opposed, that amendment carries. Now we have 307 with those 2 amendments adopted in front of us. Is there a motion? Senator Kagan, second from Senator Augustine. All in favor of Senate Bill 307 with those 2 amendments, raise your hand. All opposed. All opposed. Okay, that bill carries unanimously. Stacy, let's go back to you. Pick up on some of the bills that were assigned to you. Let's go with Senate 451.
Certainly. Senate Bill 451, Baltimore County Board of Education, non-student member compensation, student member scholarships and alteration. This bill increases compensation for members of the Baltimore County Board of Education. Compensation for each non-student member, other than the chair of the board, increases by $9,000 to a total of $16,500 annually. Compensation for the board chair increases by $10,000 to a total of $17,500 annually. The student member scholarship is also increased by $2,500, such that a student member who completes a full term on the county board must receive a scholarship of $10,000. Compensation increases do not apply to the compensation of board members serving in a term beginning before the effective date of the bill and only take effect upon the next term of office, or in the event an individual is appointed or elected to fill out an unexpired term after the effective date of the bill. There is one amendment in your packet offered by Senator Brooks on page 14, and this amendment delays the effective date of the bill to July 1, 2026 from July 1, 2024.
Okay, yes.
Senator Brooks, do you know why?
Senator Brooks, that amendment pushing back, is it, do you want to
Page 14.
question from Vice Chair Kagan?
Just curious.
Okay,
Page 14 in the packet.
yes. Hold on, 1 quick second. Oh.
It's a local Baltimore County bill,
Yes,
correct? Okay.
Okay, hold on, so I just got distracted.
And we did
Temporarily.
receive a local letter.
Yes, okay. Okay, what was the question?
Okay, the county delegation voted on this timeline. Is that accurate? The
Yeah,
amendment?
yes,
that
they
you-
did,
Okay,
right. It's been about 2 years. That's so all of the, so once that goes in, that everybody would be on the same, get the increase at the same time.
okay. Any additional questions, Vice Chair Kagan, on this Baltimore County local delegation bill? Okay, seeing none. Senator Brooks, you offering that amendment? Motion favorable?
Yeah.
Okay. Is there a second, Senator Kagan? Okay, Senator Kagan seconds it. All in favor of the Baltimore County delegation amendment, raise your hand. All opposed, that amendment carries. We now have in front of us Senate Bill 451 as amended. Discussion. Okay, is there a motion, Senator Brooks? Okay, got a move and a second from motion from Brooks, second from Vice Chair Kagan. All in favor of 451 as amended. Okay, that bill carries unanimously. Next up, Stacy, 458.
Senate Bill 458, Campaign Finance, Political Organizations, Prohibitions, and Disclosures. This bill prohibits specified persons that solicit political contributions or donations from 1, making specified fraudulent claims, or 2, making expenditures or disbursements to specified entities. Such persons must also include specified disclosures on their solicitations and websites. The State Administrator of Elections is authorized to investigate potential violations, and the State Board of Elections may impose specified penalties for a violation. Existing civil and criminal penalties also apply to the bill's provisions. You have one amendment from the sponsor, Senator Kagan, beginning on page 15 of your packet with a reprint on page 17. And this amendment would strike provisions relating to an organization fraudulently claiming to speak, write, or otherwise act on behalf of a candidate or political party or employee or an agent of a candidate or a political party for purposes of soliciting donations. Strikes certain disclosure statements that would previously have been required on certain solicitations. It clarifies the disclosure statement an organization must include on its website. It strikes provisions regarding the conduct of a raffle by an organization, and it strikes a provision mandating the State Board of Elections refer a certain matter to the state prosecutor following a specified investigation and a hearing.
Okay, questions about the amendment? Senator Kagan?
Favorable. Do you want to have the bill before us first?
Yep. Well, let's just open up for some questions. I see Senator Carosa has some questions already.
You could refresh us. What problem are we trying to solve here?
So there, thank you. So this was flagged for us by the Federal Election Commission, the FBI, and others. There is a growing, they're called scam packs. There is a growing incidence of people raising money primarily from our seniors, but from others, and then lining their own pockets and not doing what they say they're going to do with the money. So 3 examples in Maryland. 1, a scammer raised over $1 million by promising people a non-existent chance to have dinner with Donald Trump. 2, in Annapolis, a scammer raised more than $20 million on behalf, allegedly, of Ken Cuccinelli, and not a dime went to that candidate. And in Montgomery County, a scammer created a PAC allegedly to support local volunteer firefighters, raised $4.6 million. And again, not a dime went to the first responders. So this would basically have more disclosure, more accountability, and give the State Board of Elections, as amended, it's less expensive. They're just going to have subpoena powers and the ability to enforce this bill. I'm happy to move.
Okay,
Move
there were
favorable.
amendments.
Yes.
We have to move the amendments. Senator Kagan moves the amendments. Senator Augustine second. Any further discussion about the amendments on Senate Bill 458? Okay, seeing none, all in favor amendments, raise your hand. All opposed, amendments carry. Senate Bill 458 as amended.
Move favorable.
Favorable. Senator Kagan, second from Senator Augustine. All in favor of 458 as amended, raise your hand. All opposed, that bill carries. Let's go next, Senate Bill 540, Senator Guile.
Senate Bill 540, Education School Mapping Data Program, established. This bill creates the School Mapping Data Program in the Maryland State Department of Education to provide funds to local school boards to produce school mapping data for each public school in the county, including charter schools. It authorizes the School Safety Subcabinet to use funds in the Safe Schools Fund to make grants to local school systems under the program. There is one amendment in your packet offered by the sponsor, Senator Guile, and this amendment requires the Maryland Center for School Safety to administer the program instead of MSDE, and the Interagency Commission on School Construction to develop the standards for the mapping. Apparently, all the parties got together and agreed this was the appropriate parties to administer the bill. So that amendment, I'm sorry, is on page 23 of your packet if you're looking for it.
Okay, we got a motion from Senator Watson, second from Senator Kagan. Any discussion on the amendment? All in favor, Senate Bill 540's amendment, raise your hand. All opposed, that amendment carries. Now we have 540 as amended in front of us. Is there a motion? Senator Watson, yes. On the bill or on the, we already did the amendment, so now you're gonna have to vote on the bill as amended. Senator Hester.
So I was just curious which fund the money could come from at this point.
What's the bill here?
540.
Yeah.
540.
So it looks like this money comes from the Safe Schools Fund.
Is that the one that's in the Maryland Center for School Safety?
Yes.
Okay, and does it make it like an allowable use or is it like a mandated use?
It's an, says the fund may be used only to provide grants to local school systems to enhance school safety, including, and then it says that would be an allowable purpose.
Okay, so there's other bills moving that affect the same fund. So what happens if they, like more than one bill that touches this exact fund move?
Then if they all pass, then they all become an allowable use.
Okay, fabulous.
Okay, any further questions,
There's
conversation?
one last thing.
Sure.
They did, apparently there was a question at the hearing as to whether this only applied to one entity, but that is
Yes.
not the case. There are 12 different entities that in fact could use this money.
Okay, any additional questions for Stacy? Further discussion? We have in front of us Senate Bill 540 as amended. All in favor, raise your hand. All opposed, Senate Bill 540 as amended carries unanimously. Stacy, let's just stick with you to the next page. And I'm going to go down to Senator King, Senate Bill 883.
Okay. Senate Bill 883, Education Virtual Tutoring Services Applicant Review. This bill requires virtual tutoring services adhere to the same procedures as local boards of education, non-public schools, or contracting agencies when it comes to hiring an employee who will have direct contact with minors. This includes following specific documentation requirements to determine whether an individual has been disciplined for allegations of a child sexual abuse or child sexual misconduct in the past. There is one amendment in your packet offered by the sponsor, Senator King, on page 43 with a reprint on page 50. These amendments clarify that the virtual tutoring services must provide screening of contractors who provide services for students remotely, including the tutors hired through a virtual tutoring service must have a criminal history background check in the same way that other individuals that work with children. Basically, they're putting this in the family law article versus the education article. And the reason for that is because the local education agencies can set up their own practices for each LEA, whereas this other provision in the family law article, which is still background checks, but it's like one unified requirement. This way that a service can be provided to more children across the state without having to comply with 24 different sets of fingerprint requirements, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay, any questions about the amendment? We've got Senator Hester.
I'm sorry,
Your light is on, I'm sorry.
it's not supposed to be.
Okay, that answers that. Question from Vice Chair Kagan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm reading the interlineated version and the whole, the virtual tutoring services looks like it has to have a contract with the county board, the non-public school, or a contracting agency. So if I just want to hire an online tutor for my kid, this wouldn't apply.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. But that's still legal.
Yes.
And there'd be no criminal background check. We would just assume that she or he is great at math or science or whatever there can be teaching my kid.
It's your standards. You get to decide.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, additional Senator Watson.
Sure.
Sure. But before we do that, let's, okay, who wants to be on? Let's take up a sponsor amendment first. Who would like to be part of the sponsor amendment? Raise your hand. Okay, Brooks, Virtual Education, Washington, Feldman, Augustine, Watson, and Lewis Young. Okay, all in favor of the sponsor amendment, raise your hand. All opposed, the sponsor amendment carries. We're going to now take up the.
Did you say Senator Kagan? I did not hear.
No Kagan.
Okay.
We're going to go back to the King Amendment, and we need a motion on the King Amendment. Vice Senator Augustine, second Senator Brooks, all in favor of the King Amendment, raise your hand. All opposed, that amendment carries. Now we have Senate Bill 883 in front of us with those amendments. Is there a motion? Favorable motion from Senator Augustine, second from, is there a second? Second for Senator Watson. Before we vote, Senator Hester, you
I'm
have a
sorry, I
question.
did have a question.
Okay,
And I apologize to the committee. I just have a really bad headache, so I'm moving a little slow. Did we establish that it was just human tutors?
Well, you can't fingerprint an AI tutor. So I mean, it's only individuals.
Okay,
They
that
have to
makes-
be in a person.
That
Yeah.
makes me so much happier. Thank
Yes.
you so much.
okay, with that clarification, all in favor of Senate Bill 883 as amended, raise your hand. All opposed, that bill carries. Let's go to the next Stacy bill. We'll go down to Senate Bill 967.
Senate Bill 967, Higher Education, Part-Time Senatorial and Delegate Scholarships Alterations. This bill authorizes the Maryland Higher Education Commission to waive the minimum semester hour requirements, for example, 6 semester hours, for part-time senatorial or delegate scholarships on request of an applicant with a documented disability. There are no amendments and there was no opposition.
Favorable motion on 967 from Vice Chair Kagan, second from Senator Augustine. Discussion. Okay, all in favor of Senate Bill 967 clean, raise your hand. All opposed. Bill carries unanimously. Let's go down to Senator Watson's bill, Senate Bill 1091.
Senate Bill 1091, Education, Blind and Visually Impaired Students Textbook Equity. This bill requires by January 1, 2025, publishers that sell pupil edition textbooks in the state to provide an electronic file of the textbook in a specified standard to the National Instructional Materials Access Center. It further requires local boards of education to, by January 15th of each year, determine the instructional materials that will be used in the upcoming school year. A local board must coordinate with the Instructional Resource Center to provide the instructional materials in a specialized format to students who are blind or visually impaired no later than the first day of classes of the upcoming school year. The Maryland State Department of Education must provide support to the Instructional Resources Center to ensure that textbooks and supplemental materials in a specialized format are available to blind and visually impaired students statewide. If the instructional materials are not available in a specialized format at the IRC and cannot otherwise be obtained, MSDE must cover the cost to produce the instructional materials in Braille or large print. There is one amendment offered by the sponsor, Senator Watson, and this is on page 94 with a reprint beginning on page 95. This amendment alters the date by which a county board must determine the instructional materials for students, which is now limited to students with IEPs, individualized education programs, and Section 504 plans, to March 15th from January 15th. That means that each county board must choose the particular materials that a student with an IEP or a 504 plan must choose, what materials they're going to use for the upcoming school year. Further, it requires a county board and the parent of an affected student, if the county board can't fulfill the requirements of the provisions in the bill, to develop and agree on a plan to remedy the delivery of the instructional materials not later than 45 days before the first day of classes of the upcoming school year.
Okay, Senator Watson, anything you want to add on the amendment?
Yeah, I have a question on my amendment.
Sure.
So there was some back and forth of who should pay for this.
Right.
And the whole issue is once it gets transcribed into the big format, anybody can use it, not just that local school district. Does the state board, are they still responsible for the transcription services?
Yes.
Okay, all right. That's a great amendment.
Okay, do you want to move it if it's so great?
I move the amendment.
Okay, we got a motion favorable on the Watson amendment. Is there a second? Second from Senator Lewis Young. Any discussion on that? Okay, all in favor of the amendment proffered by Senator Watson on the Watson bill, raise your hand. All opposed, that amendment carries. Senator, we
Move
got
the
a
bill as amendment. as amended.
1091 has been moved favorable by Senator Watson, second from Senator Augustine. Any discussion? All in favor of Senate Bill 1091 as amended, raise your hand. All opposed, that bill carries unanimously. Now
Yay.
we're going to go to Alexis. We're going to start with your bills. Actually, let's start on that same page and we'll work our way up and back to the first page. Senate Bill 959.
All right, Senate Bill 959, Electricity Tariffs, Distributed Energy Resources and Electric Distribution System Support Services, DRIVE Act. This bill requires the Public Service Commission to adopt by December 31st, 2025, a plan to require each electric company to transition its customers to a time of use tariff by September 1st, 2028. Requires an electric company to require a customer to opt out of the time of use tariff when it becomes in effect. The authorization to implement a time of use tariff for a customer is permitted if the customer explicitly grants permission or if the electric company did not receive notice to the contrary. By April 1st, 2025, the Public Service Commission is required to adopt regulations for interconnecting bidirectional electric vehicle systems, which allows the supply of electricity to a vehicle and from a vehicle to the electric grid or to something else like a home or a business. An electric company may not require a customer who installs a bidirectional EV system to enter into a net energy contract or to apply to interconnect into the grid. Requires the commission to develop either a program for each electric company to compensate owners through a pilot program or a temporary tariff for the amount of energy they produce that supports the electric grid. Requires by July 1st, 2025, a report. It requires the Public Service Commission to take action on a plan by October 1st, 2025. By July 1st, not a report, but a submission of the plans from an electric company to implement the aforementioned program. Public Service Commission may allow the energy generated that provides support to the electric grid to count towards the greenhouse gas emissions goals within the state and energy storage device goals that we implemented in this committee last year. Authorizes the Public Service Commission to require rebates and incentives for on-site generating systems under the pilot or tariff program implemented, with some preferences being given for low-income system owners. It also sets limitations for energy storage devices using net energy metering so that the value to the customers for excess energy is not duplicative. There is a sponsor amendment in our packet. I'm just going to identify the page. All right, so the sponsor amendments begin on page 80. The amendments do several things to include limiting the on-site generating systems to those that specifically do not release greenhouse gases, limits the bidirectional vehicle regulations, the time of use tariffs, and the distributed energy requirements to apply only to investor-owned electric companies. Municipal electric utilities and electric cooperatives may participate, but are not required to participate. If they do decide to participate, they are under identical requirements for each of the provisions that the investor-owned utilities are under. Requires the investor-owned utility to file a report with the commission for a time of use tariff by July 1st, 2025. Authorizes investor-owned utilities to automatically enroll customers in time of use tariffs and to provide opt-out notice. Allows cost recovery for administrative expenses. Requires customers to apply for interconnection if a customer has a bidirectional EV system. The capacity of an on-site generator is limited to 2% of an electric utility's peak demand. Requires a separate report by separate dates from the electric company and from the PSC on the feasibility of time of use tariffs. Removes the prohibition against requiring a customer to enter into a net energy metering contract. Allows performance mechanisms to be determined by the Public Service Commission instead of being prescriptively laid out within the bill. The decision to make the pilot program or a temporary tariff permanent must be based on whether the Public Service Commission deems it in the public interest.
There's a lot there. Let me I'll just highlight a couple things. First of all, the bill as introduced was an opt-out concept where now is an opt-in. So let's just start there because that's pretty significant. And what, honestly trying to achieve here is multiple things. And I think this is actually kind of pretty innovative stuff. Starting with the time of use rate, the idea that, the current system, how we pay for electricity is super crude. And this really makes it much more taking full advantage of the technology we have with smart meters. You can now save money under this concept when rolled out. You want to do your laundry middle of the night or have loads. So it's different pricing at different times. So it saves you money and it takes stress off the grid at the same time. So this concept's rolling out around the United States. So we need this bill to allow our folks, our utilities, to try to get into the game. And then it also does a couple other innovative things. The idea that the technology is coming where when you're charging your EV car in your house, you actually will be able to use that money. Those electrons to actually feed potentially in the future electricity back into the grid. And there'll be now a market where you could actually make some money that way. And then third, there's a lot here, and we've got some folks in the audience. There was no opposition to the bill. It's really about trying to nail the mechanics of the bill down, starting with opt out to opt in, some of the timelines. Programs have to be approved. And there's a lot here. And so I would anticipate there's some questions. And, if there's too many questions, we could, but that's kind of big picture. But obviously, if there's some questions about it, but it's trying to achieve a lot in one bill, dealing with the topics we've been talking about, saving money at home, reducing stress on the grid, doing some things with your EV charging that are actually can make you some money, and all that in one bill. So that said, questions? Okay, we got a motion favorable from Senator Gallion, second from Senator Augustine. Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor of the amendments, raise your hand. All opposed, those amendments carry. Now got Senate Bill 959 as amended in front of us. Is there a motion? Favorable from Senator Augustine, second from Senator Gallion. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor of Senate Bill 959 as amended, raise your hand. All opposed, that bill carries unanimously. Let's now move to Senator Augustine's bill on Senate Bill 906, which is next up. Alexis, on your list on that second page.
All right.
Senate Bill 906, Senator Augustine.
Senate Bill 906, Housing and Community Development Conversion of Commercial Buildings for Residential Use Report. This bill requires a report by each county and Baltimore City on vacant commercial buildings and a plan to convert vacant commercial buildings into residential use. This report is due by January 1st, 2025. The report has to give updates every 2 years on the aforementioned topics. The bill requires the Department of Housing and Community Development to maintain a database of vacant commercial properties that can be used for residential purposes. On page 62 of the packet, there is a sponsor amendment which broadens the scope of the report, defines vacant commercial buildings as commercial buildings that have been abandoned, unoccupied, or empty by a period of time to be determined by the county or municipality. Each county or municipality is required to submit this report. Requires DHCD to provide technical assistance if the county or municipality requests that technical assistance. Requires the department to adopt regulations to determine whether the vacant properties may be converted to residential use as well.
Senator Augustine?
On the amendment, so what we're trying to do here is address the housing shortage that we have, and the bill concept is to look at the abandoned and vacant property, commercial vacant property, to see if there is a possibility that it could be, if it makes sense for it to be converted into residential. There was concerns from MACO and MML, which the amendments are set up to ameliorate their concerns as far as the cost and the technical challenges of doing it. I think that they are probably not all the way there, but I think they're in a posture now where they're not, against this bill. I know they're not against it in concept, and that they are working in other places to figure out how to figure out what to do with vacant property. And as one of their priorities is that. So I feel like it works with it. And I'm gonna just to get it started, I'll move the amendment.
Okay, we have a favorable motion. Senator Augustine, second from Senator Washington, Vice Chair Kagan, question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for Senator Augustine. So first off, I love this, and I think this is the direction everyone needs to be going. And I don't know if any of you all are NPR junkies as I am, but there was a great piece this morning on DC and Mayor Muriel Bowser touring the first former office building that is now residential. And that's awesome because a lot of people didn't go back to work after COVID or not as often and downsizing and all the things. So that's the preface. I have two questions for you, Senator Augustine, based on the interlineated version. First off, because each county can set their own timetable as to what the definition of vacant is, which I think is as it should be. I think we have 24 jurisdictions, blah, blah. Hypothetically, Cecil County could say 3 weeks and Montgomery County could say 3 years, and that would all be acceptable. Is one question. And then second is, I assume that it could be changed, new leadership, new definitions, need for more availability, need for something else So if you could speak to those two, that'd be great.
Sure, and Alexis can speak to the amendment as far as like the language of it, but the intent is to give them as much flexibility as possible, but that we would be creating this usable database that we would then be able to have sort of like a larger picture of it to then figure out if there were some things that we could do at the state level to be able to support the conversion. So it's really sort of, okay, how much do we have? But we're going to allow for the local jurisdiction to tell us that which they would consider to be a part of it. And that's so I hope that answers your question. Yeah.
Hither and yon, whatever
that's
that
my
is.
understanding. Yeah,
Okay.
that's the intent. That's definitely the intent.
And that is the way it is wording,
That's
his
right.
intent then is reflected.
That's right.
Perfect. I love this.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, we're gonna go to Senator Washington, then Senator Carosa.
Thank you. And thank you so much for sponsoring this bill. We passed a work group on adaptive reuse of vacant and commercial properties. And the Senate, we made all of our appointments and the group was never convened and they never did a report. So this is great because it was also reiterated in the Joint Chairman's report in 22. So this is a great idea. It's good but it's in law and we should have done it a few years ago. So this is great.
Okay, that's good. Now with that, Senator Carosa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I agree with the intent of the bill. I guess what I'm struggling with is we have the Department of Housing and Community Development under Secretary Day's leadership that seems to be, trying to have a strategic approach to these type of issues. And I just didn't understand why DHCD wouldn't do this as opposed to the counties, which I'm looking at three of my rural counties and, just kind of wondering how much of a, burden that's going to be on them.
So the response to that is that DHCD is looking and interested in working on this larger issue, but the counties and the municipalities are the ones who are on the ground and they're the ones who would know what the vacant properties that they have, just like we know in my jurisdiction, that which is not performing and not doing what it needs to do. And so the place to get the data from is really at the local level.
They have regional representatives.
They do not,
Planning and DHCD have regional representatives across the state.
Senator, the resources that they have are statewide versus the folks who are at the counties, particularly if you're at a county and let's say you're dealing with tax collection and someone is not paying the taxes. I mean, there is just a different level of information.
No, I'm saying they have DHCD and planning have people on the ground locally.
Perhaps they're more available in your county than they are in mine, and they just don't have the depth of the number of folks, and nor do they have direct responsibility for the land within the jurisdictions, which the jurisdictions do. The jurisdictions manage the properties within the jurisdiction. And whereas DHCD, which is what longer term is sort of envisioned, DHCD will be a vehicle eventually, once we know, we kind of understand what the situation is, would be an opportunity to then say from our standpoint that we should have grants, which of course the grants would then be applied for from the counties themselves, because again, they're the ones who know the different properties that are inside of their jurisdictions, which is how most of the grant programs are done now. I mean, that's where the applications come from. So that's how, for me at least, it's envisioned, as far as that it would be leading down that path. It would be leading down that path to say that it would eventually get there.
Any additional questions, comments? Okay, we have an amendment on the table. Vice Chair Kagan, yes?
Sorry to bother you again on this, but changing from each county in Baltimore City to political subdivision, I assume that municipalities would do it themselves and the counties would not do it for their municipalities.
That's the reason for doing that.
That's what I
because
said.
again, the municipalities are the ones who have the more knowledge and understanding
expertise.
inside of their area that they're managing.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Just clarifying.
Additional questions for the sponsor or for Alexis? Okay, see-
However, sorry,
Yeah,
I
sure.
point this out. However, the counties are included within that definition. So it's counties and municipalities, which places a different burden on the municipalities that wasn't under there, but there isn't overlap in a municipality having to do it twice or anything like that.
Whoever's queen bee of that.
Fair.
Okay, my sense is there could be some dissenting votes. Let's just do a
Okay.
quick roll call.
Amendment.
We had,
First we have the amendment.
I think we have a favorable motion on that amendment.
amendment.
We already did that.
Yes, so this is on the amendment.
This is only on the amendment. We're gonna just do a roll call on the amendment and then on the underlying bill. So, okay,
Senator Kagan?
Aye.
Senator Kagan, yes. Senator Augustine? Yes. Senator Augustine, yes. Senator Gallion? Yes. Senator Gallion, yes. Senator Watson? Yes. Senator Watson, yes. Senator Lewis Young?
Yes.
Senator Lewis Young, yes. Senator Brooks?
Yes.
Senator Brooks, yes. Senator Carosa?
Yes.
Senator Carosa, yes. Senator Hester?
Yes.
Senator Hester, yes. Senator Washington?
Yes.
Senator Washington, yes. Senator Simonair?
Yes.
Senator Simonair, yes. Senator Feldman?
yes, amendment carries. We have 906 as amended.
Mr. Chair,
Yes,
I would love to be a co-sponsor, and I'm guessing that maybe some other colleagues might find that interesting too. But at the very
Okay.
least, I'd like to.
we'll open it
yeah.
up for a sponsor amendment. Who would like to be co-sponsor of this legislation? Raise your hand. We've got Senator Brooks. Senator Hester, you're in the middle. Are you up or down? Okay, Senator Brooks, Senator Lewis Young, Senator Kagan, Senator Feldman, those four are on the spot. All in favor of the sponsor amendment, raise your hand. All opposed. That amendment carries. We now have a couple amendments, sponsor amendment, and the initial amendment in front of us. 906 as amended, favorable for Senator Augustine, second for Vice Chair Kagan. Discussion. Okay, let's do another roll call, just to be sure. Mario.
All right. Senator Kagan?
Aye.
Senator Kagan, yes. Senator Augustine?
Yes.
Senator Augustine, yes. Senator Gallion? Senator Gallion, yes. Senator Watson? Senator Watson, yes. Senator Lewis Young?
Yes.
Senator Lewis Young, yes. Senator Brooks?
Yes.
Senator Brooks, yes. Senator Carosa?
No.
Senator Carosa, no. Senator Hester?
Yes.
Senator Hester, no. Senator,
Hester's yes.
yes, I'm sorry. Sorry. Senator Hester, yes. Senator Washington? Senator Washington, yes. Senator Simonair? Senator Simonair, yes. Senator Feldman?
Yes, bill carries 10-1. Let's go now to Senate Bill 675 from the Office of the Comptroller. Alexis.
All right, Senate Bill 675, Individual Tax Preparers Code of Ethics, Notification and Actions, Enforcement and Penalties, Stop Scam Tax Preparers Act. This bill requires the Board of Individual Tax Preparers to publish on its website a code of ethics and rules of conduct for engaging in the practice of individual tax preparation. Requires the board to notify the comptroller within 5 business days if they take disciplinary action on an individual who violates the Title 21 of Business and Occupations. The board is required to notify the Field Enforcement Bureau or the comptroller's office if someone practices without being registered within 5 business days of receipt of the allegation. Make subject to a $5,000 fine a person who willfully prepares, assists in preparing or causes the preparation of an income tax return or claim for a refund. The penalty for the violation is deposited into the Tax Clinics for Low-Income Marylanders Fund. There is a amendment sponsored by the chair on page 39. And this mirrors it to the posture of the House bill, which passed third reading. In the bill, or the amendments require the Board of Tax Preparers to notify the Field Enforcement Bureau only after a violation, a specific violation instead of an alleged violation. It requires the publication of the Code of Ethics to be done in consultation with public input by the tax preparers community.
Okay, there was one amendment here that conforms the bill to the House bill that's passed. Motion from Vice Chair Kagan, second from Senator Augustine. All in favor of that conforming amendment, raise your hand. All opposed, amendment carries. We now have 675 as amended in front of us. Any discussion? Okay, favorable from Vice Chair Kagan, second from Senator Augustine. All in favor of 675 as amended, raise your hand. All opposed. Okay, the win for the comptroller. That bill passes. Okay, Dara, let's get you in the game. We only have one bill on the second page. Let's go to Senator Brooks, Senate Bill 915. Why don't you tell us what 915 does, and we'll go back to page 1.
Senate Bill 915, Agriculture, Invasive Plant Species Regulation, Biodiversity and Agriculture Protection Act. This bill alters the regulatory approach for controlling invasive plant species in the state. The bill repeals the existing two-tiered regulatory approach and instead establishes a regulatory approach that generally involves assessments of non-native plant species by expert assessors to determine the invasiveness rank of each such species, the review of such assessments by the Invasive Plants Advisory Committee, and the determination by the Secretary of Agriculture whether such species should be classified as prohibited invasive plants and included on a consolidated list of Maryland invasive plant species or on a watch list. Specified regulations must be adopted. Among other things, the regulations must classify as prohibited invasive plants all terrestrial plants classified by regulation before January 1st, 2024 as a Tier 1 or Tier 2 invasive plant. The bill makes other related and conforming changes. There are 2 amendments. I'm going to deal with there's a very quick technical amendment, which should be a standalone document. Just addresses some grammatical issues found in the text. The main amendment is found on pages 65 through 67 of your packet. A reprint starts on page 68. This amendment requires the Invasive Plants Advisory Committee, in consultation with the Secretary of Agriculture and the Secretary of Natural Resources, to review the qualifications of an independent assessor, report to the Secretary of Agriculture any proposed qualification changes of the assessor, review data submitted to the committee, and advise the Secretary of Agriculture regarding whether a cultivar selection or infra-specific hybrid of a prohibited invasive plant is not invasive and whether it should be classified as such. Also, whereas under the current bill, all Tier 1 and Tier 2 invasive plants are to be classified as prohibited invasive plants, the amendment changes this to apply only to Tier 1. Tier 2 invasive plants under current law are to be assessed by a certain date in accordance with the provisions of the bill. Finally, the amendment adds an exception to address concerns of the State Highway Administration, allowing the administration to conduct certain prohibited activities for the purpose of controlling or disposing of a prohibited invasive plant along state highways without prior approval of the Secretary.
Okay, yes, Senator Gallion.
Chair, I was going back through the testimony and Farm Bureau submitted about concerns with a quick implementation date and clarity of the plant species that will be included. They support with amendments, and they say they were discussed by the House sponsor that would address those concerns. So are these amendments the same thing as what the House worked out?
Yes, yes, they do. These amendments, they conform with both of the House amendments. And then we're satisfied with concerns by MDA, SHA, DNR, and the Farm Bureau.
So thank you.
Yes, sure.
Okay, any additional questions for the sponsor or for Dara? By the way, Dara, you saw our guest, did you see our friend from Ireland in the chain? Yeah.
Thinking-
I was actually
he's-
thinking about giving you a shout out in front of him.
Yeah,
but
I was thinking, should I run over? He's actually, he said he was from Kenmare, which is about 30 minutes from where my dad is from. So,
Okay,
yeah.
that's pretty cool. Okay, back to business. I just, okay, well, first we have a technical amendment,
Mhm.
which is separate. So
Yeah.
we're gonna use that to move the technical amendment. Is there a second from Senator Brooks? All in favor of the technical amendment, raise your hand. And then now we'll take the motion on the other amendments, Senator Gallion, second Senator Brooks. All in favor of that, these amendments would match the House version, raise your hand. All opposed, that amendment carries as well. We now have Senate Bill 915 as amended in front of us. Is there a motion favorable from Senator Augustine, a second from Senator Gallion? All in favor of 915 as amended, raise your hand. All opposed, 915 carries unanimously. Now let's go back and do some of the few final bills here. Dara, let's go with Senator Elfreth at the bottom of the page and we'll work our way up with Alexis and you and we'll be done. Okay, so Senate Bill 674, Dara.
Senate Bill 674, abandoned or sunken vessels and waterway improvement fund grants. The bill requires, beginning in fiscal year 2026, the Department of Natural Resources to distribute at least $250,000 annually from the Waterway Improvement Fund to a statewide Maryland-based historic preservation nonprofit organization with a demonstrated experience in grant making. The bill also modifies requirements and processes for the department to contact vessel owners during emergencies and when seizing, removing, or taking into custody abandoned or sunken vessels. Finally, the bill authorizes the department to establish and administer a voluntary vessel turn-in program that allows the owner of certain vessels to turn in the vessel to the department to be destroyed, subject to specified requirements. There's no opposition testimony, and there are two amendments. The first amendment can be found on page 25. It specifies required uses for funding received by a nonprofit organization from the Waterway Improvement Fund. As drafted, the bill had no specifications for how these funds needed to be used. There's a second amendment on pages 26 through 28 inclusive, with a reprint beginning on page 29 through page 36. The second amendment alters notice requirements and processes and requirements for the voluntary vessel turn-in program. The amendment also establishes priorities for the department in determining whether a vessel is eligible for the program. Lastly, Senator Simonaire has requested to be added as a co-sponsor of this bill.
Okay, let's take up the Simonaire sponsor amendment first. All in favor of that sponsor amendment, raise your hand. Or anybody else want to be on anybody else beyond Senator Simonaire want to be on this bill? Okay, seeing none, all in favor of the amendment allowing Senator Simonaire to be on this bill as a co-sponsor, raise your hand. Okay, all opposed, that amendment carries. Now we're on the other two amendments, unless somebody wants to separate them out, we'll lump, okay.
Move the amendments.
We'll move the amendments from Senator Augustine, second from Senator Gallion. Discussion, we've got question from Senator Carrozza.
I was just reading the fiscal note and it says that this is going to a statewide Maryland-based historic preservation nonprofit organization with a demonstrated experience in grant making. Is that going to a specific? I'm just trying to clarify if that's going to a specific.
It's not specified in the bill, if that's what your question is.
So meaning there would be there's organizations that are eligible for this, or
to be honest, I'm unfamiliar with how many organizations in the state meet this criteria, but the bill does not specify, organization X, for example.
So the water improvement fund, this is a specific requirement on this amount to go to from the water improvement fund to this described organization that we don't know if it's one or others. It is the water improvement fund has multiple uses. The reason I'm asking is we get some requests for use of this fund. So I'm just trying to understand the 250,000 and if it's specifically going to a.
So on the department's website, it describes the Waterway Improvement Fund as follows, that it provides financial support to local governments, to the department, and to federal agencies in the form of grants and or loans for a wide variety of capital projects and services for the boating public.
Yeah, I would note there was no testimony in opposition to the bill for what it's worth, but that doesn't always, just a fact. Okay. Additional questions for Dara? Okay, seeing none, we had a motion.
Yep.
And second, was it on the amendment or the underlying bill? I can't recall.
The amendment.
Okay, just on the amendment. All in favor of that second set of amendments, those two amendments, not the sponsor amendment, raise your hand. All opposed? Okay, that amendment carries. Now we have the bill 674 in front of us as amended. Senator Augustine moves that favorable. Is there a second from Senator Brooks? Discussion. Okay, all in favor of 674 as amended, raise your hand. All opposed, 674 carries unanimously. Let's go to Senator Lewis Young's bill, Senate Bill 416. Alexis? 416.
Senate Bill 416, Renewable Energy Customer Sited Solar Program. This bill establishes a customer sited solar program within the Maryland Energy Administration.
Okay, Mike.
Thank you. I'll start over. The bill establishes a customer sited solar program within the Maryland Energy Administration, MEA, to provide grants for solar energy generating systems, income verified, low to moderate income system owners, those who earn at or below 80% of the statewide median income, are eligible under the bill for the highest grant award up to $7,500 per system, funded through solar alternative compliance payments through the Strategic Energy Investment Fund. Grants up to $5,000 are authorized for non-income verified individuals located in a low to moderate income, overburdened and or overserved community, funded also through solar alternative compliance payments. A grant up to $4,000 per system is authorized for non-income verified systems outside of a low to moderate income, overburdened or underserved community. Those terms, overburdened or underserved, are defined within the environment article. And this latter tier is funded through allowances made to the C Fund, Strategic Energy Investment Fund, through allowances made from the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, RGGI. 50% of the money allocated in the C Fund for renewable and clean energy programs must be used for the program to provide grants to systems that would not otherwise be eligible for funding. 60% of solar compliance payments must be used to support the installation of these systems under the program. Authorizes MEA to adjust the grant amounts based off of market conditions and fluctuations there. Grants are also authorized to be provided for home improvements connected to a solar energy generating system. On page 6, we have a sponsor amendment, and there's an additional amendment that is conceptually proffered by Senator Augustine. So on page 6, the amendments change the low to moderate income threshold from at or below 80% of the statewide median income to at or below 150% of the statewide median income. It delays implementation of the program from November 1st, 2024 to January 1st, 2025. Requires the contracts entered into for the installation of these solar energy generating systems to include a signed disclosure form that is to be developed by MEA, to include an executed lease contract or power purchase agreement, and to meet minimum benefits between the owner and another party as defined by MEA. Removes additional tiers of grant eligibility. As amended, only low to moderate income and income verified individuals are eligible for grants. So the additional tiers outside of low to moderate income and non-income verified are removed. Removes the permissibility of additional grants for home repairs. Removes the requirement that grants be funded through RGGI allowances and that 50% allocated for clean and renewable programs be used for grants. Reduces from 60% to 20% the amount of solar compliance payments that must be used to support the program, and allows up to 10% within the solar compliance payment pot to be used to administer the fund. Removes authorization of MEA to modify the grant amounts based on market conditions. Requires the installation of a system within 180 days after a grant is reserved by the administration. Requires consumer protection. Requires MEA to adopt a consumer protection policy that prohibits a solar lease from increasing each year more than 3%, and also allows cancellation of an agreement up to 10 days after signing. This is different from the amendment conceptually that Senator Augustine is proffering, whereas Senator Lewis Young's amendments allow the cancellation of these contracts up to 10 days. Senator Augustine wants to increase that to allow termination up to 30 days or cancellation up to 30 days. Additionally, Senator Lewis Young's amendments terminate the program after 3 years.
Okay, so help the committee out, Senator Lewis Young and Sarah Augustine. We're just trying to, for purposes of discussion, votes. I know we have MEA in the House here as well. If you want to come up, our MEA representatives. So help us out, understand the amendments and where the differences are. I think this could be helpful.
Want me to? Coverage?
Yeah, maybe you could boil it down a little, also supplementing what Alexis just described.
Sure. So the biggest things were,
Yeah.
I'm Evie, speaking for the record from the Maryland Energy Administration, Evie Schwartz. Sorry about that. Reducing the scope and size of the program was really where the amendments were coming from. Making sure to preserve other MEA programs, solar programs. So we've reduced the amount of solar ACP special funding to this program from 60% to 20% in order to preserve the programs on schools and parking lots and other things. Also cutting out a need for any RGGI funds, RGGI renewable energy funds, as well as cutting out a need for any general funds. That was a really big difference. We've also, in order to cut out any need for general funds, we did allow for administrative costs to MEA to come from the special funds pot of solar ACP funds. There also was a lot of discussion around consumer protections. And so that's where MEA will be publishing those consumer protection. And the question on the table for this committee is around that cancellation period of whether it should be 10 days or 30 days to allow a customer to cancel with no penalty. The other parts we're in pretty consensus on. And
Okay,
yeah.
well, I appreciate that. Sarah Augustine, could you weigh in here so we could sort of sort out a little bit where your amendments.
Absolutely. So first of all, I just want to say thank you to the sponsor and the advocates for working with me on this, because I think that this is just a good, stronger bill that now has some consumer protections. I'll just share with you all, there's a couple of things I think that are really great. One, I'm grateful that it's now really just targeted on low and moderate income Marylanders. I think that's just so very important. I think it's actually an appropriate use as well for those ACP funds, because it will go directly towards providing, energy specifically, which is, I think, is a fantastic use for it. But I was concerned, as originally drafted, that it was open to folks who lived in areas that were that might be of lower income, but they aren't necessarily. And I just thought that was not really sort of in keeping with what this program should do. Then the other part that I was a little bit concerned about is that the grants go directly to the developer. And so if the grants going directly to the developer, I was just a little worried that to make sure that there were some protections to make sure that the folks knew what it was, knew what they were getting into, and that that they were comfortable and felt like they were able to get the value out of it, which is some of those disclosures and things that were talked about. And we all agreed to that. The last kind of piece was the 10 days. The 10 days in order was, okay, person has been disclosed, they've gotten information about this contract, that the way it came originally, they would be given 10 days to cancel, basically to terminate and say, oh, you know what, I really don't want to do that. For me, I was like, you know what, this is a 20-year contract. I mean, this is like somebody putting something on your roof. And the least thing that we could do is just say 30 days, if you give yourself a little bit more time to get information for folks to be able to better understand sort of what's going on before they're just committed to a 20-year contract that they have. And so it just felt like it was an additional sort of consumer protection. I did talk to MEA that some of their grant programs are similarly situated where you do have an opportunity for 30 days in order to be able to, to move. And that's why I felt like that just made sense to add into it.
Okay, so just to be clear, so we have the 10 days versus 30-day issue. What other issues?
That was it.
That's the.
Otherwise,
only
we worked together and got
Okay.
to a consensus on it.
Okay, Senator Lewis Young.
The income cap has
Yeah.
been addressed, yeah.
Well, first of all, I want to thank both Alexis and Evie for all of your hard work, your persistence, and your patience on this bill. The amendments have been numerous and your responsiveness has been outstanding. And I also want to thank Senator Augustine for making this a much better bill. We had a conversation in the back right before we started voting, and I'm in total agreement with his rationale that when you're making a 20-year investment, you should have 30 days. So I'm fine with that as well.
Okay, so but for purposes of voting here, we have the Lewis Young amendment. If we just modify that amendment to now have 30 days.
Just one letter.
We can just take one
I'm sorry,
vote.
one digit. 1, 2,
Right.
and 3.
Okay, so everybody understand, we're basically, let's go with the Lewis Young amendment, but instead of the 10, it's gonna be 30. In accordance with the suggestion from Senator Augustine. Everybody understand that? Okay. Is there a motion? Okay,
Yeah, I'll
before we
make the
do
motion,
anything,
or you want to do it
let's
after?
have a discussion. You have a question?
Yes.
Okay, yes. Sure.
So with the amendments, now who is paying for this and where's it coming from and how much? Because before it was going to be the CEF and that's through Reggie, right? So it's not that anymore. So now,
Let me address that one. So it's from the solar alternative compliance payments, which are another special funding source that are in the CEF fund.
so it's still coming from that CEF fund then. Okay, and then it's still the same with the general fund expenditures increased by about $2.5 million. Is that, or is that down to?
$0 from general funds, with the provision that MEA's administrative costs would come from the solar alternative compliance payment special funds as well.
Okay, can other small businesses be negatively affected to the extent they benefit from other MEA clean energy programs? And now the funding is now going to this?
The solar alternative compliance payments were already earmarked for solar programs. So this is just putting into statute the mandate on what the design of the program should look like.
Okay, thanks.
Additional questions about the amendment or the amended version of the bill? Okay, I think Senator Augustine, you were leading off with a favorable motion. Senator Lewis Young, would you second the amendment? Okay, any further discussion on the amendment? Okay, all in favor of the amendment that we've just discussed, raise your hand. All opposed? It appears the amendment has carried. Can we now have Senate Bill 416 as amended in front of us? Discussion. We have a motion from Senator Augustine on 416 as amended. Is there a second from Senator Lewis Young? Discussion? Okay, should we, okay, all in favor, raise your hand. Is all opposed? Okay, let's do roll. Hey, let's strike that. Roll call. Let's go.
All right, Senator Kagan.
Aye.
Senator Kagan, yes. Senator Augustine.
Yes.
Senator Augustine, yes. Senator Gallion. Senator Gallion, no. Senator Watson. Senator Watson.
Yes.
Senator Watson, yes. Senator Lewis Young, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Senator Lewis Young, yes. Senator Brooks.
Yes.
Senator Brooks, yes. Senator Carosa. Senator Carosa, no. Senator Hester. Senator Hester, yes. Senator Washington. Senator Washington, yes. Senator Senator Simonaire. Senator Simonaire, no. Senator Feldman.
Yes, bill carries 8-3, which brings us to our final bill of the day, Senate Bill 300. Dara.
Senate Bill 300, Natural Resources, Wildland Areas, Belt Woods Wildland. This departmental bill authorizes the Department of Natural Resources to authorize within the Belt Woods Wildland archaeological inventories, studies, and research that involve surface examination or limited subsurface sampling, to salvage and excavation of archaeological sites, and stabilization and restoration of historic structures existing as of December 1st, 1985. Any such authorization may only take place with prior approval of the Maryland Historical Trust and after an internal departmental review. There was no opposition testimony. There was one amendment on page 3 of your package. The amendment does two things. First of all, a technical change to correct the spelling of archaeological. The second amendment requires the department to consult with the Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission prior to undertaking any activities on the Seton Belt Barn located in the Beltwoods wildland.
Okay, any questions for Dara, either on that spelling error amendment or the other amendment?
Fascinating.
Okay, anybody want to move an amendment?
I'll move the amendment. Both are correct.
Okay, let's just put them both together.
Yeah, it's all good.
Is there a second on this?
Second.
Okay, a motion favorable second. All in favor of that amendment on Senate Bill 300, raise your hand. All opposed. Senate Bill 300 as amended, a bill that had no opposition, is in front of us.
Second.
Second, Senator Augustine favorable, second Vice Chair Kagan, Senate Bill 300, all in favor, as amended, all in favor, raise your hand, all opposed. That bill carries, ladies and gentlemen. We passed 22 bills, and that we're going to call it a day on bills. Now, reminders, Senator Augustine was hoping to get, briefly some time on Senate Bill 5.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah, now.
yeah,
Right now.
yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, no break, just right now, just a few minutes. Is that okay, Mr. Chair?
Absolutely.
All right, so just to kind of refresh folks' memory, Senate Bill 5, we heard it a long time
Yeah,
ago.
wait, let's, do you want a live stream or no?
I don't
live?
care.
Okay, okay, let's.
That's fine. I'm fine,
was
either
it?
way.